Shalom, shalom, everybody. We are back, and I can see that the mic is on. So hopefully, people won't be scrambling and saying, "What's going on with the sound?" So we thank Yahweh for that. Okay, so we're still finishing off our discussion on the journeys, the 42 stops in the wilderness before we get to the next chapter. So thank you for being patient as we journey through this journey record. We've now been through all 42 stop departure points. And what we see here is that we learn a great lesson on a body of Messiah that's journeying as sojourners here, so that we can guard ourselves against the pitfalls that can cripple us, like it did to those in the wilderness that did not obey. When they grumbled and they moaned, they didn't submit, etc. And so we need to get inspired when we are on this journey. And we are on a journey in the Master. And what I want to share every time I share this, because I do think it's uniquely positioned for us to understand who we are in the Master. And when we look at the 42 starting points or departure points or stops, whatever you want to call it, in the wilderness, we are able to liken that in Messiah to his genealogy in the flesh of man. When we look at Yirmeyahu 1, and we've got 42 generations from Abraham to Yeshua, and we are given a clear list of names here that go from Abraham, and we know that Messiah said, before Abraham was, I am, and the Pharisees started trying to accuse him of blasphemy, and how can you say you're not even 50 years old yet, and yet you say you were before Abraham, etc. And when we look at Yirmeyahu 1, it's a genealogy list of covenant, because Yahweh made a covenant with Abraham. So here, when he made it clear that he would come and redeem his people through man, and he chose Yehudah, here we see this line from Abraham as a covenant, Yahweh choosing to come in the flesh of man. And when we look at this list of names in Yirmeyahu 1, and in the notes, you can go look at all the meaning of the names. I know in the past I've given out the list that you can actually paste in your scriptures next to Yirmeyahu 1. It's always nice reference. So I'm not going to run through every name in the meaning, just for sake of time. I'll leave that to you to test what I'm telling you. But I am going to give you the summary of what these names carry for us when we chronologically go through the names from Abraham to Yeshua Messiah. I just want to also highlight in this list what I do want to make clear. Just want to highlight something here, that when we look at Yosef, because there are different translations that have interpreted different messages and kind of lose the clear picture and line of our Master. In verse 16 of Yirmeyahu 1, it says, Yaakov brought forth Yosef, the husband of Miriam, of whom was born Yeshua, who is called Messiah. Now, when we see that word for husband in Greek, it can also refer to the father. So here you've got Yosef ben Yaakov, and Yosef ben Yaakov was the father of Miriam. In Lucas, you get a clear reference to the list of the genealogy, but in reverse order. And we get to make it very clear here that you've got Yosef, Ben Yaakov, Yosef, son of Yaakov. Yes, the husband of Miriam, not the father of Miriam. But you've got, what we're seeing here is you've got this picture of a genealogy coming through, that some might say that Yosef, how could he be in the line? Because they're saying husband of Miriam, but this is Yosef, father of Miriam. Okay, because you've got Yosef ben Yaakov. The son of Yaakov then had, his daughter was Miriam. Everybody there with me? Because there's a mistranslation there that says husband, but that is because when you got in Lucas, I'm just going to go to Luke in Yirmeyahu 1, you've got the record, and here we see going from Yirmeyahu, where we got Yosef, son of Eli, of Yirmeyahu of Eli, and now you've got all the way from Adam if we go in reverse order, it goes all the way to Yeshua, and reckoned by law, son of Yosef, of Eli, of Matityahu. So he was reckoned by law, according to the Lucas account, as son of Yosef, because he was the husband of Miriam. But that Yosef is of Eli, where this Yosef and Matityahu one is of Yaakov, so it's the father of Miriam. Okay, so I just wanted to highlight something there, because often people think that this Yosef being spoken of in Matityahu 1 is the husband of Miriam. In Lucas, he is the husband of Miriam, because that's of Eli, because it's reckoned by law son of Yosef, because it wasn't literally a son, but by law, because of his betrothal with Miriam. So, but in here, we've got Yosef, the father of Miriam. So I just wanted to highlight that. It's just there's some interesting side notes, if you will. But as one goes through the list of names, I've put this into a paragraph that goes from Avraham, which means exalted father, all the way to Yeshua Messiah, and we get the following. The exalted father laughs at the enemy. The one who is praised breaks through a wall of great height. For our kinsman redeemer is noble, and the prophet spoken of, who is clothed with strength, has come to serve. The beloved one is the Prince of Peace, who sets the people free and enlarges their territory. Our Father is Yahweh, and he is the healer who judges, and he is the one who raises up and exalts. Our strength is in Yahweh, who is perfect and has taken hold of his people for a possession. Yahweh is our strength, who causes us to forget our troubles, and he is the master builder who heals us and establishes us. El was asked about the exiles sown in Babylon, and has answered, for our Father is majestic, and he is a lamp who raises up and helps. And he in righteousness he raises up, and he is greatly to be praised. For he has helped in giving the gift of life to Yaakov, his allotted inheritance, which he increases through our Savior, Yeshua Messiah. Just, you can look at the notes if you kind of want to go through that again, but it's just nice to see this listing of names, giving us a powerful start to this genealogy of Messiah. And why it's the genealogy of Messiah? Because it's all about covenant. It's not to say that Messiah didn't exist until he came in the flesh of man. He is the I am. But here is a covenant genealogy that highlights we who were once far off now have been brought near. Now we are too sons of Abraham, reckoned according to the blood of Yeshua that's grafted us in by law to his covenants of promise. Now we are legally citizens of Israel, for which we are now given the responsibility to shine that light. And so the wilderness journey reminds us who we are and who we are not to be, so that we can make sure that we stay who we are supposed to be, so that we can have this assurance of entering in to the reign of our master and not having the second death have power over us, an assurance as we guard our garments and guard our lives against any form of corruption, rebellion, compromise, so that we live set-apart lives in the praise and esteem of our Savior, who gave himself for us as an offering, a sweet offering, you know. So back to Bamidbar 33, at the end of this chapter, they were clearly told to drive out, to lay waste, to destroy, to annihilate all the Canaanites. And when you look at all the nations, you see all the things that you need to destroy out of your lives. We've been through that as we've gone through the book of Bamidbar. So we're coming to the end of Bamidbar. And this part in the Torah portion here and the last chapter, which highlights the daughters of Tilofchad, which we spoke about last week, are just summaries of the word of Yahweh still remaining true. Even though Moshe wasn't going to go, it's highlighting you keep the Torah, you know. And so we see a powerful witness here of conquering Canaan was not something that was for the faint-hearted. And as we continue to walk in the promises of Elohim, we realize that it is going to be a road of battles. It's going to be battles that can be overcome, as Yahweh delivers our enemies up before us in order that we may utterly destroy them. We have a responsibility to destroy, lay waste, and drive out that which should not be in our lives. And this is something that we must take serious if we want to live true set-apart lives. And so what we see today is, by belief in the word, an active living belief of obedience is what causes us to be more than conquerors, more than overcomers in the master. And the bottom line is this: if we don't destroy that which needs to be destroyed, we'll get destroyed. Driving out, destroying, laying waste are all very aggressive words, which highlight the intensity in which we should not allow anything to encroach in our lives, lest we find ourselves being crippled by those things, And as they were to go in, anything that was not destroyed would be thorns in their sides and pricks in their eyes. And the last thing you want is a prick in your eye and a thorn in your side. It's going to hinder your vision. It's going to hinder your walk. And so we are to walk upright, set apart lives who have ears to hear, eyes to see, feet to walk, hands to raise in praise, and celebrate the joy that our Master has given us. We must also be warned against evil company that corrupts good character. In the instruction that's given here, we see that when they had to inherit the land, each by lot, everyone played a part. Everyone has an inheritance which we are laboring and journeying together for. And so we are to help one another in the battles of life. We can't just say, okay, I got mine. We are to walk together in unity. And so as we go through this list of journeys and think of the genealogy of Messiah, and then we look at the instructions to destroy, to lay waste, we must realize that this walk is an active walk of obedience. It's not a once saved, always saved. We've come out of slavery. We are on guard against grumbling against stuff because it doesn't seem to go our way, because our way doesn't matter anymore because there is only his way. And in doing that, we realize the comfort and strength that we are to have to celebrate him for everything that he does for us, learning, as Shoal says, to be content in all circumstances, so that we are enduring and letting endurance have its work so that we are complete, lacking naught. That complete doesn't mean I've ended my journey. It means I have all to do what I need to do in Messiah. And therefore, I'm mature enough to recognize that I can get through these battles as long as I fix my eyes on the Master and I don't allow the lust of the flesh to hinder my walk in the Spirit. That's a summary of chapter 33, in a sense. Okay, chapter 34. Hold on, I'm in Yirmeyahu here. I was jumping the gun. Okay, Numbers 34. Okay.
And Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, Command the children of Israel and say to them, When you come into the land of Canaan, this is the land which falls to you as an inheritance, the land of Canaan to its boundaries. Then your eastern border shall be from the wilderness. Then your southern border shall be from the wilderness of Sin along the border of Edom, and your southern border shall be eastward from the end of Salt Sea. Then your border shall turn from the southern side of the ascent of Akrabim, continue to Sin, and be on the south of Kadesh Barnea, and it shall go on to Hatzar Adar, and continue to Atzmon. And the border shall turn from Atzmon to the Wadi of Mitzrayim, and it shall end at the sea. As for the western border, you shall have the great sea for a border. This is your western border. And this is your northern border. From the great sea you mark out your border, line to Mount Hor. From Mount Hor you mark out your border to the entrance of Hamar, and the edge of the border shall be towards Sidad. And the border shall proceed to Siphron, and it shall end at Hatzar Enan. This is your northern border. And you shall mark out your eastern border from Hatzar Enan to Shepham, and the border shall go down from Shepham to Rivlah on the east side of Ain. And the border shall go down and reach to the eastern side of the Sea of Kinnereth. And the border shall go down along the Jordan, and it shall end at the Salt Sea. This is your land with its surrounding boundaries. And Moshe commanded the children of Israel, saying, This is the land which you inherit by lot, which Yahweh has commanded to give to the 9 tribes and to the half-tribe. For the tribe of the children of Reuben, according to the house of their fathers, and the tribe of the children of Gad, according to the house of their fathers, have received their inheritance, and the half-tribe of Manasseh has received its inheritance. The 2 tribes and the half-tribe have received their inheritance beyond the Jordan of Jericho eastward, toward the sunrise. And Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, These are the names of the men who divide the land among you as an inheritance, Eleazar the priest and Jehoshua son of Nun. And take 1 leader of every tribe to divide the land for the inheritance. And these are the names of the men from the tribe of Yehudah, Caleb son of Yefuneh, and from the tribe of the children of Shimon, Shemuel son of Ammihud, from the tribe of Benjamin, Elidad son of Kislon, And a leader from the tribe of the children of Dan, Buki, son of Yogli. From the sons of Joseph, a leader from the tribe of the children of Manasseh, Haniel, son of Ephod. And a leader from the tribe of the children of Ephraim, Kemuel, son of Shiftan. And a leader from the tribe of the children of Zebulun, Elitzaphan, son of Parna. And a leader of the tribe of the children of Issachar, Paltiel, son of Bazan. And a leader from the tribe of the children of Asher, Ahihud, son of Shalomi. And a leader from the tribe of the children of Naphtali, Padael, son of Amihud. These are the ones Yahweh commanded to divide the inheritance among the children of Israel in the land of Canaan.
Okay, so this chapter just highlights a clear allocation of the land that was to be divided among the tribes and given a clear reference to all the boundaries for each tribe. And so what we see here, when we look at this, the lesson that we're able to learn from this is the focus on boundaries. The Hebrew word for boundaries in verse 2 is gevula, and it means a boundary, a territory, a landmark, and it's the feminine of the word gevul. And so before we go into the land, Yahweh defines its clear boundaries. And so we all need boundaries. We know, the world is getting worse and worse. Children without boundaries are more likely to end up breaking the law and possibly end up being imprisoned as a result of parents not putting boundaries down when they were growing up. Boundaries are good for us. They keep us safe. They keep us in a place of knowing where we are safe, where we should be and where we should not be. Now, we know there are many people who love to test the boundaries, but we're not instructed to test boundaries. We are instructed to stay within the boundaries, the borders. Boundaries that are set by Yahweh shows us that he loves us. We must take note here that this is a command that's given, And when we consider the application of this chapter in a practical sense, we realize that we've been given good boundaries in his word. We even see in Psalm 16, verse 6, it says, boundary lines have fallen to me in pleasant places. Indeed, a good inheritance is mine. If we love him, we obey him. That's the simple fact. And when we disobey him, we won't keep the boundaries. That's the fruit of somebody's life. You'll see whether they stay within the boundaries of the Torah or whether they're trying to test or break the boundaries and break free as if they're being enslaved. But the boundaries of Yahweh don't enslave us. They actually protect us to flourish. And so his boundaries that are commanded by Moshe, the Torah, and revealed by the life, death, and resurrection of Yeshua Messiah, the living embodiment of the Word made flesh, we see that these boundaries or these borders that is given to us, we see that while gevula is used as boundaries, in verse 3, the word for border is from the Hebrew word peah, which means sign, a side, border, edge, or boundary. Comes from the word pa'ah, which means to cut them into pieces or to cleave to pieces. In other words, it's a picture of what's been allocated and laid out. And so we also learn from this word about boundaries that we should not cut boundaries, Vayikra 19 verse 9 uses the word pia when it says, when you reap your harvest of the land, do not completely reap the corners of your field or gather the gleanings of your harvest. We're also told in Vayikra 19 verse 27 to not round the corner of our head nor destroy the corner of your beard. And so these verses that highlight an idea of peah, the emphasis in the instructions given in terms of the borders and boundaries that Israel were to inherit by, the lesson is very clear. It's as simple as this: don't cut corners. How many people today, even claiming believers, you'll find them trying to cut a corner, whether it's to pay taxes, pay tithes, pay bills, whatever it is. They'll try and find a way to cut corner to figure out how they don't need to do something. And so I can tell you now, if somebody's trying to cut corners in giving to the taxman what's due to the taxman, I can tell you now he's cutting his corners with Yahweh. And so we see that this is something just in practical lessons. If you see people's characteristics cutting in certain areas of their life, allowing compromise because they cut a corner. And, I talked about if you try and bend the truth, it's no longer truth. And I think when you do that, then you see that people don't see the pleasant boundaries of obedience to Yahweh. They're always trying to see what they can do to not have to obey, which is a lot more work and effort, and you get drained by it. We cannot walk in Messiah and cut corners. You know, so many people are doing that. They're overstepping the commands that are pleasant, thinking they have a right to change what Yahweh said and have some reason behind why it doesn't apply to us anymore. We understand certain things that don't apply to us in terms of physical sacrifices and the shedding of blood. That's very clear through the witness of the shadow picture that they were of Messiah and his blood that causes us to draw near. But practical living in obedience to the Torah has never been done away with. In fact, it's now been called to a higher standard, as our master made it clear. You've heard that it was said, but I say to you, because he got to the heart of the matter. Because what the boundaries do, they define the heart of Yahweh's desire to have his people protected, to have them flourish, to be fruitful and multiply, and to shine his esteem in everything that they do. And so we see in this chapter that the boundaries that are given here in this chapter. Now, interesting, if you want to go and you can mark out the boundaries, it's almost like you can go from the east to the west. The west was the Great Sea, so that was the western border, and then you've got the north and the south, and you can see the allocation of the lands there, and you can get various pictures. It's nice, interesting things to do when you are spending a little bit more time in the scripture and you're doing it. But what we do take note, it's significantly smaller than what's being spoken of in Yechezkiel 47, when you look at verses 15 to 20, as in terms of the promise that was given to Abraham in Bereshit 15, when he says, on the same day, Yahweh made a covenant with Abraham, saying, I have given this land to your seed from the river Mitzrayim, which is the great river, or to the great river, the river Euphrates. Now we know that Abraham, when he left his father's house, he crossed the Euphrates River, and he became the first one to be called a Hebrew, the one who crosses over. Now, when one looks at the Euphrates all the way to Mitzrayim, we can see that that certainly wasn't these boundaries that were here, but for this moment in time. So many might argue, but yes, Reuben, Gad, and half the tribe of Manasseh are still within the promise given to Abraham, yes. But that's not what Yahweh instructed for the tribes then under the hand of Moshe. So we see that as Yahweh allows, it's like he gives you something, and as you're diligent with it, he increases it. And this is the picture that we see here, you know, from the Nile to the river Euphrates. The inheritance of Bamidbar 34 is only a portion of the full promise that was given to Abraham. And we take note that the boundaries that are spoken of in Yechezkiel is what is still to come. So we've got much to look forward to, showing us that this wilderness journey must teach us a lesson we have not arrived yet. And therefore we must learn not to settle in the comfort of our fleshly ways, or settle in our surroundings and think, I don't need to do any more. I don't need to obey this, and I don't need to do that. Why do we need, you know, when people start whining, why do we have to do this on the Sabbath? Why do we have to do that on a feast? Why? But then, funny enough, you'll find them following traditions of man while neglecting the commands of Elohim, which are easy and light, you know. So the leaders from the 10 tribes that were to inherit the land, we know that obviously who was put in place as headship here was Eleazar, now the high priest, and Yehoshua, highlighting again that it's a shadow picture of our master, Yeshua Messiah, who is the one who appoints leadership to help inherit. So too do we see that obviously out of all these tribes, we see Caleb being mentioned here, because the rest of the leaders, when they were around in Caleb's first count as a leader to go spy the land, they're not there anymore, so their sons are in place now. And this second generation is called now to not fall into the same error and make sure that they do what Yahweh says. This chapter ends with a clear mention that these leaders were the ones that were commanded by Yahweh to divide the inheritance. And once again, it's Yahweh who calls and equips for leadership, not man. These guys were already leaders that were established. They'd shown themselves to be leaders, and Yahweh made it clear, these are the ones that you appoint. Because Yahweh knows those who are his, and Yahweh knows those that are fully equipped to serve according to his standard and keep people within their boundaries. And so not one of them were a son. These leaders, not one of these leaders were a son of someone in chapter 1, except for Yehoshua, who was the grandson of Elishama. So it just shows you the devastating effect of wrong leadership, how it can also affect your family. Okay, chapter 35, cities of refuge.
And Yahweh spoke to Moshe in the desert plains of Moab by the Jordan of Yericho, saying, Command the children of Israel that they shall give the Levites cities to dwell in from the inheritance of their possession. Also give the Levites open land around the cities, and they shall have the cities to dwell in, and their open land for their cattle, and for their herds, and for all their livestock. And the open land of the city which you give the Levites are from the wall of the city outward 1,000 cubits all around. And you shall measure outside the city on the east side 2,000 cubits, and on the south side 2,000 cubits, and on the west side 2,000 cubits, and on the north side 2,000 cubits. And the city is in the middle. This is to them the open land for their cities. And the cities which you give to the Levites are the 6 cities of refuge, which you give to the manslayer to flee to, and to these you add 42 cities. All the cities which you give to the Levites are 48, these with their open land. And the cities which you give are from the possession of the children of Israel. From the larger tribe you give many, and from the smaller you give few. Each one gives some of its cities to the Levites, in proportion to the inheritance that each inherits. And Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, and say to them, When you pass over the Jordan into the land of Canaan, then you shall choose cities to be cities of refuge for you, that the manslayer who struck someone mistakenly shall flee there. And they shall be cities of refuge for you from the revenger. And the manslayer is not to die until he stands before the congregation for right ruling. And of the cities which you give, 6 are to be cities of refuge. Give 3 cities beyond the Jordan, and give 3 cities in the land of Canaan, as cities of refuge. These 6 cities are for refuge for the children of Israel, and for the sojourner, and for the settler in their midst, for anyone who mistakenly strikes someone to flee there. But if he has stricken him with an instrument of iron so that he dies, he is a murderer. The murderer shall certainly be put to death. And if he has stricken him with a stone in the hand, by which one could die, and he does die, he is a murderer. The murderer shall certainly be put to death. Or if he has stricken him with a wooden instrument that could kill, and he does die, he is a murderer. The murderer shall certainly be put to death. The revenger of blood himself puts the murderer to death. When he meets him, he puts him to death. And if he thrusts him through in hatred, or throws an object at him while lying in wait, so that he dies, or in enmity he strikes him with his hand so that he dies, the one who struck him shall certainly be put to death, for he is a murderer. The revenger of blood puts the murderer to death when he meets him. But if he pushes him suddenly without enmity, or throws an object at him without lying in wait, or uses a stone by which a man could die, throwing it at him without seeing him, so that he dies, while he was not his enemy or seeking his harm, then the congregation shall judge between him who struck someone and the revenger of blood, according to these right rulings. And the congregation shall rescue the manslayer from the hand of the revenger of blood, and the congregation shall return him to the city of refuge where he had fled, and he shall remain there until the death of the high priest who was anointed with the set-apart oil. But if the manslayer at any time goes outside the limits of the city of refuge where he fled, and the revenger of blood finds him outside the limits of his city of refuge, and the revenger of blood executes the manslayer, he is not guilty of blood, because he should have remained in his city of refuge until the death of the high priest. But after the death of the high priest, the manslayer is to return to the land of his possession. And these shall be for a law of right ruling to you throughout your generations in all your dwellings. Whoever strikes a being, the murderer shall be executed by the mouth of witnesses. But one witness does not bear witness against someone to die. And take no ransom for the life of a murderer who is guilty of death, but he shall certainly be put to death. And take no ransom for him who has fled to his city of refuge to return to dwell in the land before the death of the priest. And do not profane the land where you are, for blood profanes the land, and the land is not pardoned for the blood that is shed on it, except by the blood of him who shed it. And do not defile the land which you inhabit, in the midst of which I dwell, for I, Yahweh, am dwelling in the midst of the children of Israel.
Okay, so this chapter deals with the city of the Levites that they were to inherit and the cities of refuge. So you got 48 cities that were given to the Levites, and 6 of those 48 cities were designated to be cities of refuge that a manslayer could flee to, and this chapter highlights our master. We read, I said to you earlier from Proverbs, the name of Yahweh is a strong tower, the righteous run into it and are safe, and we realize how we pray and celebrate that our master is our refuge and our strength. The Hebrew word translated as refuge is miklat. It means refuge or asylum, and this denotes the place of refuge from the revenger of blood. It's used 20 times in Scripture, and it's always used in connection with the cities that were appointed to provide asylum for those guilty of involuntary manslaughter. if you were guilty of murder, you were put to death. Okay. And so what we see here is the one who's guilty of murder is put to death, while initially those not guilty of homicide could seek asylum, while those who killed with premeditation, who'd actually planned it, they would even be dragged from the slaughter place to be put to death. We got an example of this. We see here in the Torah, it says, he who strikes a man in Shemot 21, so that he dies, shall certainly be put to death. But if he does not lie in wait, but Elohim delivered him into his hand, then I shall appoint for you a place where he is to flee. But when a man acts presumptuously against his neighbor to kill him by treachery, you are to take him even from my slaughter place to die. I mean, sometimes people thought, okay, if I put my hands on the slaughter place, you're not going to take me. One of the sons of David did the same thing, you know. And we see here that Israel would now be settled in the promised land, and a distance to the slaughter place for those who wanted to seek asylum might have been a problem to ensure their safety in being proven not guilty. So that's why these cities played a very significant role, you know. And so Yahweh's basically being practical here. He says, here's a provision for my mercy that's clearly shown that these are the ways that you are able to maintain the proper standard of right ruling within the borders. And so it's a powerful picture of the work of our high priest and king. In this chapter, we see Messiah, in him we see a twofold picture of Messiah, in that one, he is our refuge, and the one who we trust, and by whose death we are released from enslavement to sin and being in danger of the revenger of blood coming to, take vengeance for us on our sin, because Yahweh ultimately is the revenger of blood. When he talks about the blood of Hevel cries out, we see how Yahweh is still coming to take vengeance on the sons of disobedience. So if we are not found to be in Messiah, we risk being destroyed by him. So we see Messiah, who was anointed to serve as high priest, because part of the condition of one seeking refuge would be that you stay in that city of refuge until the death of the high priest. So we see a wonderful picture here of knowing that our master lives forever in the order of Melchizedek. Therefore, the practical lesson that we have, because we find refuge in him, and therefore to stay in him means to stay in him. And to find ourselves outside of him, by outside of his boundaries, we open ourselves up for his judgment and vengeance to actually have a right to destroy us. When you look at this, and if any manslayer was not in the city of refuge, then the revenger of blood, the one who wants to take vengeance on the blood that was shed, he has a right, and he would not be seen as a murderer because he would have a right to take revenge. So the only place of safety would be in the cities of refuge. And so all of this here, shadow pictures a powerful lesson for us of what we have in the master, and take serious how important it is for us to stay in him. Tehillah 61 verse 3 says, you have been my refuge, a strong tower in the face of my enemy. Because we also do have an enemy that's seeking to kill us. So in one sense, you can have almost like a revenger of blood, that we know Yahweh is the one who will take vengeance. Leave vengeance to Yahweh. But we also have an enemy that is seeking to take our blood. And when we're not found in the master, as innocent as we might be, if we're not in the master, then we're not really innocent. Then we open ourselves up for being guilty, and therefore can't plead anything other than, well, I wasn't in the master, therefore the revenger of blood, whichever way somebody wants to see who is this revenger of blood, has right for it, And so the principle of the cities of refuge teach us the main lesson to stay in Messiah. At the time of Israel, when they would have new high priests, obviously when the high priest died in the line of Aharon, then it would be, and maybe you only been in the city of refuge for a year, maybe it was 20 years, then you go home. And then the new high priest would set up, and so it would keep the cities of refuge an appropriate place. It wouldn't get overcrowded, But we do take note on a bigger picture that the picture that this is giving through the Torah is the refuge that we have in our master. And because he lives forever, we should not be found to be outside of him. When he says, stay in me and I stay in you, he means it. An example that we see of neglecting to keep the command to stay where you are to stay, we see in 1 Kings 2 a man called Shimei. Now, Shimei is the guy that didn't like David. And he was like this little yapping dog that he was throwing stones at David, And when David met him, he swore he wasn't going to put him to death. But in his closing words that David gave to Shlomo, his son, he told his son, you'll know what to do with Shimei. Okay? Because when David's men said, listen, let's just put this dead flea. Let's just kill him. No. If Yahweh sent him to curse, let him carry on. I'm not going to. But he told his son, because his son was not a man of blood. And so David would go into battle, leading the armies against the enemies of Yahweh, but he wasn't going to bother about this guy throwing stones at him. Who's this Shimei? But he told Shlomo, you know what to do with him. So Shlomo then made it clear to Shimei that he was not allowed to leave Jerusalem, and the day that he would leave Jerusalem and pass over the Wadi Kidron, he would die, and his blood would be on his own head. So we see a similar principle being laid out here. You don't leave here, and if you do leave, you're going to pay the price. Shimei agreed to the words of Shlomo. He said they were good words. But 3 years later, some of Shimei's servants, he still had a business, a thriving business. 3 years later, Shimei, some of his servants, they fled to Gath, and Shimei was told, and he thought, hey, hold on, I've got to go get back my slaves. And so he left, and Shlomo was told about this, and he called Shimei, and he put Shimei to death. This account is so vital for us to understand, because Shimei might have thought, it's 3 years ago, they've forgotten. Maybe he had. He had forgotten. Maybe he forgot. Yeah, Shimei forgot, And we see a powerful lesson here that we should never forget or neglect to recognize the safety that we have in our master. Not for a moment, because Shimei's also a picture, he wanted to get his slave, because now he's, so what is he chasing after fleshly things? And so we are to stay in our master. That's as simple as it gets. Yochanan 15, we all know. Stay in him, and he stays in us, and we can bear much fruit. The Greek word for stay carries the meaning staying, be continually, but it also carries the meaning to endure, and has the idea in the Greek mindset to remain as one, not to become another or different. So stay in Messiah and represent his character. He doesn't change, we should not change. Any thoughts on the chapter of refuge? I think the main thing for me of the city as refuge is staying in Messiah. It's an enhancement of the Torah that Messiah is giving us to stay in the vine. Okay, daughters of Zelofhad.
And the heads of the fathers of the clans of the children of Gilad, son of Machir, son of Manasseh, of the clans of the sons of Joseph, came near and spoke before Moshe and before the leaders, the heads of the fathers of the children of Israel, and said, Yahweh commanded my master to give the land as an inheritance by lot to the children of Israel, and my master was commanded by Yahweh to give the inheritance of our brother Zelofhad to his daughters. Now if they are married to any of the sons of the other tribes of the children of Israel, then their inheritance shall be taken from the inheritance of our fathers, and shall be added to the inheritance of the tribe into which they marry, and taken from the lot of our inheritance. And if the Yuval of the children of Israel takes place, then their inheritance shall be added to the inheritance of the tribe into which they marry, and their inheritance taken away from the inheritance of the tribe of our fathers. And Moshe commanded the children of Israel according to the word of Yahweh, saying, What the tribe of the sons of Joseph speaks is right. This is the word which Yahweh has commanded for the daughters of Zelofhad, saying, Let them marry who is good in their eyes, but let them marry only within the clan of their father's tribe. And the inheritance of the children of Israel is not to change hands from tribe to tribe, for every one of the children of Israel is to cling to the inheritance of the tribe of his fathers. And every daughter possessing an inheritance in any tribe of the children of Israel is to be the wife of one of the clan of her father's tribe, so that the children of Israel possess each the inheritance of his fathers. Thus the inheritance is not to change hands from one tribe to another, but every tribe of the children of Israel is to cling to its own inheritance. As Yahweh commanded Moshe, so did the daughters of Zelofhad. For Machla, Tirza, and Chogla, and Milcah, and Noah, the daughters of Zelophehad, were married to the sons of their father's brothers. And they were married into the clans of the children of Manasseh, the son of Joseph, and their inheritance remained in the tribe of their father's clan. These are the commands and the right rulings which Yahweh commanded the children of Israel by the hand of Moshe in the desert plains of Moab by the Jordan of Jericho.
So once again, this is still fresh, hopefully, in our minds. We discussed the daughters of Zelophehad and their approach to Moshe in regards to their inheritance in Bamidbar 27. And we see here how the daughters of Zelophehad, for me, represent ones who understood submission. And in understanding submission, had the ability to appeal what was rightfully allowed to be appealed for according to the clear instructions. The boundaries had been set. Now the heads of the fathers' clans, now they said, this is our areas, but they said, hold on, but we just want to remind you, Moshe isn't going to be here with us anymore. Remember what he's spoken. What happens when, how are we going to keep our father's inheritance? So it was clearly established not to mix tribes. And so when we look at this in terms of inheritance, this would retain identity of tribes because ultimately it would keep the lineage of the tribe of Yehuda, according to prophecy, intact. And so we learn in our master, this is a wonderful lesson when Shaul also teaches us that we should not become unequally yoked. This is really about keeping our identity. The one thing that the daughters of Zelophehad desired was to keep and retain their identity. That's the lesson that we get from this, Now we know in the body of Messiah, we understand we are one in Messiah because now in Melchizedek, there is a reflection of the fullness of the body becoming one in him. But that also doesn't neglect this heart of saying, okay, in Messiah, I don't want to be part with Belial, anything worthless. So therefore, we will not join ourselves to any corruption or any form of corruption, but we retain our identity in Messiah so that we have our inheritance secure. And therefore, we can, by staying in the master, keeping our boundaries intact, have the full assurance that we will not lose our inheritance. Because that was the desire. Ultimately, that was the heart of the daughters of Zelophehad. They didn't want to lose any inheritance, And so as they knew, as we go forward, we want to get what's rightfully ours to have. And that's our desire for all of us. Our reward is in the heavens. And so we are laboring for that reward of eternity with our master, and we don't want to lose that. So therefore, the way to do that is to understand the boundaries that have been set are there to protect us, protect our identity, and to cause us to actually never be without fruit in the master. Having established the knowledge that we are fellow citizens and members of the house of Elohim, we are reminded that we must be trustworthy, we must be faithful ambassadors in making sure that as we sojourn here in our master in Elohim, we do our utmost to make sure that we stay in him and dwell in him continually. That's ultimately what it's all about. Amen? Okay, so that's our Torah portion on journeys today. And we're going to go straight into Yirmeyahu. Last week we looked at the commissioning of Yirmeyahu as a young man, being told not to break down before people and speak the word of truth and not be afraid that he will be like a flint before them, and that his own people would be against him. The same word that was given to Yechezkiel in type. And here this week we go now look at the words that Yahweh begins to give Yirmeyahu in cautioning him or giving him words to caution against the rebellious lot. I just want to I keep losing my mouse here today. I don't know what's going on. Okay, so let me get to Yirmeyahu 2. Verse 4. There's Kayla.
Hear the word of Yahweh, O house of Jacob, and all the clans of the house of Israel. Thus said Yahweh, what unrighteousness have your fathers found in me, that they have gone far from me, and went after worthlessness, and became worthless? And did not they say, where is Yahweh, who brought us up out of the land of Mitzrayim, who led us through the wilderness, through a land of deserts and pits, through a land of drought and the shadow of death, a land that no one passed through, and where no one dwelt? Then I brought you into a garden land, to eat its fruit and its goodness. But when you entered, you defiled my land and my inheritance, and made my inheritance an abomination. The priests did not say, Where is Yahweh? And those who handled the Torah did not know me. And the shepherds transgressed against me, and the prophets prophesied by Baal, and walked after matters that did not profit. Therefore I still contend with you, declares Yahweh, and with your children's children I contend. For pass beyond the isles of Kittim and see, and send to Kedar and observe well, and see if there has been any like this. Has a nation changed its mighty ones which are not mighty ones? But my people have changed my esteem for that which does not profit. Be amazed, O heavens, at this, and be frightened, be utterly dried up, declares Yahweh. For my people have done evils. They have forsaken me, the fountain of living waters, to hew out for themselves cisterns, cracked cisterns which do not hold water. Is Israel a servant? Was he born in the house? Why is he given to plunder? The young lions roared at him, they growled and made his land waste. His cities have been burned without inhabitant. Even the sons of Noph and of Tachpanches have shaven the crown of your head. Have you not done this to yourself by forsaking Yahweh your Elohim when he led you in the way? And now why take the way to Mitzrayim to drink the waters of Shihor? Or why take the way to Ashur to drink the waters of the river? Your own evil instructs you, and your backslidings reprove you. Know therefore and see that it is evil and bitter that you have forsaken Yahweh your Elohim, and that my fear is not in you, declares the Master Yahweh of hosts. For of old I have broken your yoke and torn off your chastisements, and you said, I am not serving you, when on every high hill and under every green tree you lay down a whore. Yet I had planted you a choice vine, all of it a true seed. How then have you turned before me into the degenerate plant of a strange vine? Although you wash yourself with lye and use much soap, yet your crookedness is ingrained before me, declares the Master Yahweh. How do you say I am not defiled? I have not gone after the Baals. See your way in the valley. Know what you have done. A swift dromedary breaking loose in her ways. A wild donkey used to the wilderness, sniffing the wind in the desire of her being. In a time of mating, who turns her away? All those who seek her need not weary themselves. In a month they find her. Keep your foot from being bare and your throat from thirst. But you said, It is useless, because I love strangers and after them I go. As the thief is ashamed when he is found out, so is the house of Israel ashamed. They and their sovereigns and their heads and their priests and their prophets, saying to a tree, You are my father, and to a stone, You gave birth to me. For they have turned their back to me and not their face. But in the time of their calamity they say, Arise and save us. But where are your mighty ones that you have made for yourselves? Let them arise, see if they save you in the time of your calamity, because your mighty ones have become as many as your cities, O Yehudah. Shall you not from now on cry to me, My Father, you are the guide of my youth?
So the word of Yahweh through the prophet Yirmeyahu, this newly appointed and commissioned young man who had to go and speak these very clear words against a rebellious people, it was really highlighting their worthlessness, their futility of their wicked ways of running after idol worship and whoring with the nations. And Yonah, in his prayer of repentance when he was in the big fish, he says in Yonah 2 verse 8, those observing false worthlessnesses forsake their own loving commitment. And so when people are actually guarding their own worthless matters, loving commitment for Yahweh, that yoke of loving commitment is not on them, you know. And so when we see here, the word for false in Hebrew is shav, which means falsehood, lies, vanity, emptiness, worthlessness, deceit. And the Hebrew word for worthlessness is hevel, which means vapor, breath, delusion, futility, nothingness. I mean, I could keep going on. As a verb, it means to act empty. And think about that, to act empty. It's a nice description. How many people are acting empty? There's nothing to show for their works. Becoming vain, being led in futility, to be filled with vain hopes. That's what this word means. So many people today that are not paying attention to the Torah of Elohim are running after falsehood. They're running after worthless matters of lawlessness, paying attention to corrupted systems of teachings of men that have clearly set aside the need to grow in and learn the Torah. And so they're I mean, a lot of people are diligently observing worthlessness and in great danger of being destroyed when the coming wrath of Elohim comes upon the sons of disobedience. You know, in Melachim Aleph, 1 Kings chapter 16, we are told about Omri, who was the father of Achav. Now, Omri was a very wicked king, and we are told he did more evil in the eyes of Yahweh than all those before him. Why? By walking in the ways of Yarovam and provoking Yahweh with their worthlessnesses. Yonah expressed very clearly for us, when you go after worthless things, idols and vanity that don't satisfy, you'll be handed over to the delusion of that futility, and you'll forsake true loving commitment. Provoking Yahweh with futility has got no value in it at all. Mishle 3 verse 3 says, let not loving commitment and truth be forsake you. Bind them around your neck, write them on the tablet of your heart. This is something that we need to recognize, that Yahweh has called us into covenant. He remains lovingly committed to his covenants of promise, and therefore he calls us to be a people that can serve him in spirit and truth. And in this section that we've just read, Yirmeyahu, this young man that's now told to go out, the setting of this chapter is, it's about 600 years or so before Messiah came in the flesh of man. And Yehuda was facing some pretty difficult times. The house of Israel had already been taken captivity by the Assyrians, and Yehuda had been gripped by idolatry, which King Manasseh had promoted during his 55-year reign. His son Ammon was just as wicked. And then the son of Ammon was Yoshiyahu. Yoshiyahu, the son and grandson of such wicked kings, is one that he became king at 8 years old, and he ruled for 31 years, but he provided through his reign some stability in bringing people back into covenant with Yahweh and stripping the land of all its idols. And Yirmeyahu was the prophet through all of this, you know. And so Yirmeyahu here in the beginning of this chapter, being around about 17 to 20 years old, somewhere around that age, you know, he might have been hesitant to speak, but yet he was sent. If you look at the words of Yirmeyahu, he was sent to bring 13 messages that you can break down in the book of Yirmeyahu. And we're reading part of that first message here in chapter 2, because some of the messages go over a couple of chapters, you know. What he was confronting was the waywardness of Jerusalem. And to emphasize this, he contrasted Yehuda's former devotion. We started from verse 4 last week, we read to verse 3 of chapter 2, and how Yahweh said, when you were in the wilderness, you followed me, you listened to my voice. So he contrasted a time when they were listening to Yahweh to look at you now. What happened? That's why the book of Lamentations, which Yirmeyahu wrote, says, how, Echa, how can it be that this is what it's like? What happened to you guys? They were the first fruits of, and any nation that tried to take them found themselves facing Yahweh's punishment and anger. And yet we see how the first fruit became corrupt, making the whole lump corrupt. And so here we see Yehuda were now at a place where they had so far departed from Yahweh, not because there was fault in Yahweh, and Yahweh certainly had never abandoned them in the wilderness. It's because they didn't stay in his word. The priests were not inquiring of Yahweh to seek Yahweh, and they disobeyed and they rebelled against the Torah, and the prophets were giving false messages. Now, if the priests and the prophets aren't even obeying the word, what hope do the people have that they are supposed to be equipping? Because it's from the lips of a priest that they're supposed to teach knowledge and the difference between the clean and the unclean, the set apart and the profane. But their fathers, they had followed worthless idols and caused everyone to be in just a state of worthlessness. And when Yahweh said, what unrighteousness have your fathers found in me that have gone so far from me and went after worthlessness and became worthless? He's basically saying, what do you think's better out there? Why have you gone so far to rubbish? Was there something in Yahweh that you found was not good enough? You know, our master warns us that when salt loses its saltiness, it has no value anymore except to be thrown out. And so in that, he tells us we are to be a light to the world and we mustn't hide that light. So we see here when Yahweh says, what unrighteousness have your fathers found in me? That's the word avel, which is wrong, iniquity, injustice. Devarim 32 verse 4 says, the rock, his work is perfect, for all his ways are right ruling, an El of truth, and without unrighteousness. Righteous and straight is he. Yahweh was making it very clear here. He is righteous. Why have they gone for unrighteousness? And they followed after worthlessnesses. The Hebrew word for worthlessnesses, as I said, is from hevel, and it comes from haval, which is just to be full of futility, to be filled with vain hopes. Isn't that what a lot of people are filled with today? Vain hopes. You got your hope? Actually, our hope in the Master is secured. In Yirmeyahu 16 verse 19, a passage we all know very well, O Yahweh, the nations, or my strength and my stronghold and my refuge, in the day of distress the nations shall come to you from the ends of the earth and say, our fathers have inherited falsehood, futility, and there's no value in them. The word for futility is the same word used for worthlessness. Our fathers have inherited worthlessness. No value in it. It's empty. And that's what's happening in our day. As we're coming out from the nations, we're saying what our fathers did. That's what we're saying. In the darkness, it was no value in it. Now we want to find that value in our Master. And this was clear in this chapter, that there wasn't anybody seeking Yahweh, as everyone was now under the false guidance of false priests, false prophets, walking after matters that didn't profit. Nobody was inquiring after Yahweh, quickly forgotten that he had delivered them from Mitzrayim. And in verse 6, we see here that it can be assumed that they weren't keeping the feasts of Yahweh as commanded either. When we see here, it says, they did not say, where is Yahweh, who brought us up out of the land of Mitzrayim? They weren't keeping the Sabbaths and feasts the way they should. They were on the high hills. They were worshipping Baal. It's like people today who claim to want to have something in the Bible. I use the term like that, but yet they're not bothered. They don't even know the word, but they're listening to their false priests and prophets. What about people who claim to be on the word, claim to be keeping Sabbath of some sort? In the days of Yirmeyahu, if you carry on reading in chapter 7, Yahweh warns them, says, don't come in here and say the temple of Yahweh, when you've just come from Baal. You're mixing your worship. Worthless. Bringing in a little bit of worthlessness, you make the whole lump worthless. You know? In a Psalm of David, we see him identifying worthlessness of the fool that's not seeking Yahweh when he says in Tehillah 53, verse 1 to 3, the fool has said in his heart, there is no Elohim. They have done corruptly. They have done abominable unrighteousness. No one does good. Elohim looked down from the heavens on the children of men to see if there is a wise one seeking Elohim. They have all turned aside. They have together become filthy. No one is doing good, not even one. Now, when David was writing the psalm, some believe that it's either when he was fleeing from Shaul or from his son Absalom. So what David saw, it's not that there wasn't righteous people that were linked with David. What he saw is this nation that's supposed to be righteous, that he's supposed to be sovereign of, are trying to put him to death. And here he's saying, look at these people. Yahweh's looking down, and what does he see? This is the chaotic situation that David was crying out, because by them rejecting David as sovereign, they were basically rejecting Yahweh's call on his life and saying, we'll do what we want. And when it says in Yirmeyahu that priests who handle the Torah don't know Yahweh, that's pretty scary, isn't it? And isn't that how bad it is in most religious circles today? They don't know Yahweh. And how do we know that they don't know Yahweh? Well, we're given the formula. By this we know him, when we guard his commands. But those who aren't guarding the commands are leading people supposedly in the word. But they're leading them in worthless, futile, empty matters. Shepherds were transgressing against Yahweh. Prophets were prophesying by Baal. Nobody was inquiring after Yahweh. And as a result of that, the corrupt teachings corrupted the entire nation. Ezekiel 34 deals very clearly with the warning that's given to false shepherds who are feeding the flock with falsehood, muddying the waters. And in Yirmeyahu, a warning is given against the prophets who are speaking under the influence of Baal. So let's apply this living word to us today. People who are putting themselves in assumed positions of leadership, who are, in a sense, because remember, prophesying is speaking about Yahweh, in a sense. An office of a prophet is to call people back to the Torah and warn what will happen when you don't. But when you prophesy, you're speaking about Yahweh. When you're praying, you're speaking to him. So there's an office of a prophet, and then there's prophesying. When the people were prophesying in the camp, you remember when they all started prophesying, they were speaking about Yahweh. They were speaking of his great deeds. And it was, so here we see again when Shavuot, when the Spirit was poured out and everybody heard them speaking the great deeds of Yahweh, they were all prophesying. But now this false prophecy, prophesying under the influence of Baal, you have people today who claim to be speaking about Yahweh, but they're actually under the influence of the Lord. Now, I'm putting it in those words because that's exactly what's happening, even within claiming Torah circles. It's very frightening. But these are the awakening, shaking words that many in the body today still need to hear, because these words that Yirmeyahu were bringing wasn't to the nations, it's to Yehudah. So when we look at the mirror of the word, this is to the body of Messiah. David wasn't speaking about the nations. There's not one that does good, because none of the nations were serving Yahweh. He's talking about the nation that's supposed to be seeking Yahweh. They're not doing it. And so those who handle the Torah don't know me. What a frightening thing to think of. When our master says, not everyone who says to me, Master, Master, will enter into the reign of the heavens. I mean, this is going to be a day of weeping and gnashing of teeth, you know. One of the things that we see here when Hosea says, let us pursue to know Yahweh. His going forth is as certain as the morning. I mean, Yahweh is not hidden. He's made himself known. He's come to us like the rain, like the latter rain watering the earth. We can be sure of him making himself known if we are seeking him as we should. But in Yirmeyahu 8, he says, even a stork in the heavens knows her appointed times, and a turtle dove and a swallow and a thrush observe the time of their coming, but my people don't know the right ruling of Yahweh. Worthlessness. I want to touch on this. Things that don't profit you, you know. When we look here at strict or very, not strict, harsh words of warning and rebuke against false teachers, we are told that they were walking after matters that do not profit. Now, the phrase not profit is lo yolu. It comes from lo, which is not, no, never. Not, no, never, neither. Okay? Ya'al means to confer or gain profit or benefit or avail or furnish or that which is profitable and good. So the word ya'al in its root is actually a very good word. It's what you can profit by. But when it's lo, yolu, lo and ya'al, it means no profit, no benefit. Ya'al is used 23 times in 21 verses in the Tanakh. It's mostly used in relation to that which does not profit, but we do see it's translated as what is best. In Yeshayahu 48 verse 17, it says, thus said Yahweh your Redeemer, the set apart one of Israel, I am Yahweh your Elohim, teaching you what is best, what is profitable, leading you by the way you should go. And a word that's derived from Ya'al, that's the positive sense of Ya'al, but when it's mostly linked with not profitable, the word that's derived from Ya'al is Belial, coming from Beli, which is failure or wearing out or lack of or corruption, and coming from Bala, which means to fall or become old or decay or be consumed, and then Ya'al. So in other words, you're wearing out the profit, the benefit. You're wearing it out. You're consuming it. So Belial, as we understand, Shaul says, what agreement does Belial have with Messiah? So Belial, the Greek term Belial, coming from the Hebrew Belial, means worthlessness, wicked, naught, unprofitable. And he makes it clear that when you serve Messiah, you cannot actually engage or have part with that which fails to avail much. You know, when we hear the call to come out and be separate, he's saying stop following worthless matters. So here when Shaul is highlighting there's no partnership between Messiah and Belial, he's asking the rhetorical question because the obvious answer is no. Yirmeyahu was confronting the people with the same thing. How have you wearied Yahweh? How have you found something wrong in Yahweh that you've gone after other things? But Yahweh says those are Belial, failure to profit, not following Yahweh. Yahweh says through Yirmeyahu, I still contend with you. Because some people think, well, I'm not going to do what Yahweh wants. No, Yahweh's still going to contend with you. And you don't want to be contending against Yahweh. Yahweh will clearly find the fault in you through his word, that nothing is hidden. They had changed Yahweh's esteem to worthless idols. And that's done in the form of corruption through making of things and worshiping them and bowing down to them. It says in verse 13 that they had done two evils. One is they had forsaken Yahweh, the fountain of living water, and they made for themselves systems that are full of cracks. You know, we know that what's essential for life is Yahweh's word, as pictured through living water. Without water, we don't have life. And so the cisterns that had cracks in, showing that they can't retain the water, they can't retain the life. And as we know in Yirmeyahu 2, Yahweh describes the image of a potter in the potter's house. And so we see between Yirmeyahu and Zechariah, Yahweh uses this imagery very clearly to highlight how Yahweh can destroy the clay, which is man, and remake him. You know, we understand the source of true living water is in our master. And when David fled from King Shaul into the wilderness, he cried out to Yahweh and he said, I earnestly seek you. My being has thirsted for you. My flesh has longed for you in a dry and thirsty land without water. Because David had been fleeing from a wicked king. And this land that was supposed to be flourishing, a representation of Yahweh's presence, David is saying, I'm still hungering and thirsting for righteousness. And this is a valuable lesson for us today. We're living in a world where you just look around and it's like the people are oblivious. They don't know Yahweh whatsoever. And it feels like this, you know, we have longed in a dry land because we're in a wilderness at the moment, spiritually speaking, but we have the access to the waters. And we have this promise of being able to be nourished if we hunger and thirst for it. David reflects for us one who truly hungers and thirsts for the living water. We cannot forsake the fountain of living water, because if we do that, we will die of thirst, you know. And so when Yahweh says David was telling Shlomo, his son, he said in 1 Chronicles 28, when he was passing over the baton, if you will, to his son, he said, as for you, my son Shlomo, know the Elohim of your father and serve him with a perfect heart and with a pleasing life, for Yahweh searches the hearts and understands all the intent of the thoughts. If you do seek him, he's found by you. But if you forsake him, he rejects you forever. You know, most people under the corruption of worthless teachings are never told this simple, very clear truth, that if you forsake Yahweh, he rejects you. Because this false message that's gone out, no, he will never reject you. The word says if you forsake him, he'll reject you. Who are you to change the word of Yahweh? And we also told in the prophets that if we don't guard his Torah, he will reject us as his priest forever. He says, my people perish for lack of knowledge. And it carries on, but I reject you because you're not seeking him and your children. You know, we also told in 2 Chronicles 15, he went out to face Asa and said to him, hear me, Asa, and all Yehuda and Benjamin. Yahweh is with you while you are with him. And if you seek him, he is found by you. But if you forsake him, he forsakes you. And for many days, Israel had been without the true Elohim and without a Torah priest and without Torah. Now, both of these give us clear accounts of when you don't seek Yahweh and you forsake him, he rejects you. How important it is for us to not reject the fountain of living water, you know. And when we reject the ability to be in the word of Yahweh, we're rejecting Yeshua Messiah. We're not possessing that witness. You know, and having the picture of a cracked cistern, we also understand the words of Shaul to Timotheus and Titus about guarding our vessel, knowing how to possess our vessel. And the way we do that, making sure that we're not cracked, is by making sure that we are growing in our set apartness and getting rid of all the junk that we shouldn't have in our lives. You know, a cistern is an artificial reservoir for water, and it was typically one that would be normally put underground, and leaking or cracked systems were often used for burial sites because it was no good for water anymore, so they used those, or for torture or prison chambers. And Yirmeyahu 38 verse 6, we're told that he was lowered into a cistern, a muddy pit. And when we think of a cistern, you're thinking probably this little clay pot, but I'm talking big cisterns that held lots of water, you know, water supply that's supposed to be there, but a cracked cistern is just going to leak everything out. Cisterns were used in many parts of the Middle East. Springs were, if you think about it, springs weren't abundant everywhere. You didn't just find, so when you found water, you had to fill cisterns that were made underground to retain the water. And so people would dig wells and cisterns in order to catch any water they would get from a little bit of rain or redirect a stream, etc. What helped? Today, we got JoJo tanks here in South Africa, but we always say a JoJo tank is no good when there's no rain, When there's lots of rain, then they're just overflowing. But the idea is you've got this cistern that you can redirect water to, but if that cistern is cracked, it's useless. And Yehuda preferred stagnant waters of cisterns that were broken over what Yahweh could supply for them. Yirmeyahu, on the other hand, was a picture of a righteous king that even under siege, he directed the waters of Yahweh into the city so that it would survive. People prefer stagnant junk, and somehow under the delusion, they think that's what they need over the fresh living water of Yahweh's word. And so what do people do? They dig their own cisterns, because that's what Yahweh said. This is one of the evils. You got your own cisterns, not Yahweh's source. And when it says that those, it highlights for us, those who have forsaken Yahweh and hewn out their own cisterns are led astray by their own evil ways. And as a result, they've got no fear of Yahweh. So isn't that when people are doing what they want, it shows they don't fear Yahweh. Doing whatever is right in one's own eyes. And the more and more that we walk on this road, and we're not, we realize how important it is, this narrow path, and how narrower it is getting, how hard pressed it is getting, because there are many who claiming, look, you don't have to look too far on the internet, and you can find a lot of Torah resources. And I say that with air quotes, but when you look through the thing and you filter it and sift it according to the word, they're all man-made cisterns. Cracked. There's lots of cracks in them. And this is what we have to be on guard against, because if we're drinking from those sources, we are in danger of backsliding and forsaking Yahweh and at risk of being rejected by him. Did you want to share something?
If you do what's right in your own eyes, and you just worshiping self.
Yes.
You don't have to bow down before Molech or Baal.
No.
You bow down before
Yeah. You become your own mighty one, yeah. Yirmeyahu 3, it says, for all the causes for which backsliding Israel had committed adultery, I had put her away and given her a certificate of divorce. Yet her treacherous sister Yehuda did not fear, but went and committed whoring too. When we see the effect of people that don't follow, over the many years, we can see how when people have fallen away, you can see their lives. You can actually see, look, how did they end up there? And you can see, obviously, not staying at the true source. But then you got to think, how is it that you can see what happens to some people and then others aren't warned by it? But yet Yehuda saw what happened to Israel, but they didn't wake up and think, we don't want to be kicked out too. But yet they were kicked out. So we must be on guard against turning away from Yahweh. And this is what Yirmeyahu is warning against here, is that we are needing to be a people who know how to walk with Yahweh, know how to serve him. And one of the things that we see in this chapter here, and I sometimes think the heaviness that had to be on Yirmeyahu to go and proclaim these words, this is not easy to be able to share these words in the face of people who aren't listening. And how sad it is when so many people really couldn't care less about the warnings that are given in Scripture, yet somehow they think, I'm fine. But yet their lives and the fruit of their lives clearly reflect that there's some cracks there. Get the breaches repaired. Then you can retain and hold so much more and be a source of so much more to so many people. It says in verse 33 that they were even, I know we read to 28, but if you look at verse 33, it says they were even teaching the evil women their wicked ways. They were teaching the whores new tricks. So the people that were supposed to be set apart went and whored with the women of the nations, and then they were teaching those women even new tricks. So many people will try to keep up with the latest trends and teach people new ways that the world's doing. And you know what? We don't need to be like the world as believers. We just need to represent Yahweh. You don't have to keep up with what the world is doing. And sadly, most who just want their ears tickled will only get tickled by those that are keeping up with the standards of what the world is doing. Oh no, so you're not, your presentation is not good enough. You're not, oh no, it doesn't grip me, or it's not quick enough, it's too long. Whatever the things are, you know what? We shouldn't be trying to attain to this standard of the world and trying to even teach the world new tricks. I mean, that's just crazy. Yehuda had broken systems. False mighty ones, they were mighty ones, you know. False prophets who were speaking in the name of Baal. Anyway, I could keep going on, but this is a clear message of a warning against the wickedness of being worthless.
You gotta find it a little, not funny. But they make such a fuss over the inheritance.
Yeah.
They never got rid of the nations. As soon as they went into the land, they didn't get rid of all.
No.
They didn't do it. And then in Yirmeyahu, I think it's around 17, when he says, you gave away your own inheritance.
Yeah.
So, I mean, just who's going to inherit and who's getting what and what do we lose? I mean, they gave it away as soon as they got
Yeah.
in.
And how do you give it away? By not guarding the commands. Because you're just giving it away.
To mix
Yes.
intermarrying and doing what the nations
Yeah.
do. So it's so funny that they made such a fuss about what happens.
Yeah.
But I mean, none of it ever. And also, just another observation is 3 of the cities were beyond the Jordan.
Yes.
Gad and
Manasseh and Reuben.
The other 3. So the smaller version beyond the river had to have the same amount of
Yes.
cities of refuge.
Yeah.
Is where all the people go that broke the law.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. What you're trying to say is you had now 3 cities of refuge for 2.5 tribes, 3 cities of refuge for 9.5 tribes. You know, it's like, it just shows you in that in itself presents choices. That you want that, there's a lot more you're going to have to fight to stay set apart in, you know. So, you know, Yirmeyahu is a very, I find it one of the most powerful books of the prophets. They're all powerful, but I mean, they have unique, how can I say, presentations that give us great lessons. But Yirmeyahu is almost like this living word for us today in the state that the bride is in. And when he was living at a time when Yehuda had, you know, they put on a show. Let's just put it like that. They were putting on a show and Yahweh highlighted their futility. And when confronted, they wanted to kill the true speakers of the word. But the good news that we see, obviously, in a time when you did have one sovereign that was willing to make reforms, Yoshiyahu, you know. But even he did not see the fullness of people coming back. So we understand that this is a warning that we receive here. And just as Yahweh made it clear he divorced the house of Israel, so too is he coming to send away those who are not part of him when he comes to receive a bride that is in walking in the perfection of set apartness. Okay, on this very encouraging note of staying in the Master in our journey and being warned against worthless matters, let's look at another warning in the renewed writings that Yaakov gives us. Who's going to read Yaakov 4, verse 1 to 12?
Where do fightings and strivings come from among you? Do they not come from your pleasures that battle in your members? You desire and do not have. You murder and are jealous and are unable to obtain. You strive and fight and you do not possess because you do not ask. You ask and do not receive because you ask evilly in order to spend it on your pleasures. Adulterers and adulteresses, do you not know that friendship with the world is enmity with Elohim? Whoever therefore intends to be a friend of the world makes himself an enemy of Elohim. Or do you think that the scriptures speak to no purpose? Does the Spirit who dwells in us intensely crave unto envy? But he gives greater favor. Because of this he says, Elohim resists the proud, but he gives favor to the humble. So then subject yourselves to Elohim, resist the devil, and he shall flee from you. Draw near to Elohim, and he shall draw near to you. Cleanse hands, sinners, and cleanse the heart, you double-minded. Lament and mourn and weep. Let your laughter be turned to mourning, and your joy to dejection. Humble yourselves in the sight of the Master, and he shall lift you up. Brothers, do not speak against one another. He that speaks against a brother and judges, he who speaks against a brother and judges his brother, speaks against Torah and judges Torah. And if you judge Torah, you are not a doer of Torah, but a judge. There is one lawgiver and judge, who is able to save and to destroy. Who are you to judge another?
This passage, we go and we jump to almost the end of a letter, and then we start reading it, which is nice to go because specifically for what we're looking at today. But I think oftentimes people forget to recognize who was this letter written to. And you just have to go to the beginning of the letter, and he says, Yaakov, a servant of Elohim and of the Master Yeshua Messiah, to the 12 tribes who are in the dispersion. So he's writing to the 12 tribes. And so when he says adulterers and adulteresses, he's writing to the 12 tribes. He's not writing to the nations. And this is often a very sobering wake-up call. And all of the renewed writings, we often say the letters are written to believers, you know. So when we are urging with these matters and trying to highlight how a body should not be, it's because this is exactly what the word is showing, a mirror, and saying, guys, this is how you should look, this is how you should not look. So this was written to people who claimed to be part of Israel in a dispersion. And therefore this letter is just as alive for all of us in a scattered state today as it was for those who were alive in the days that he wrote this letter. And in this section, he presents the theme of jealousy and strife, which are mentioned in this section that we've just read here. In 13 to 18, it says in the previous chapter, it says, who is wise and understanding among you? Let him show by his good behavior his works in meekness of wisdom. But if you have bitter jealousy and self-seeking in your hearts, do not boast against and lie against the truth. This is not wisdom coming down from above, but is earthly, unspiritual, demonic. For where jealousy and self-seeking are, there is confusion and every foul deed. But the wisdom from above is first clean, then peaceable, gentle, ready to obey, filled with compassion and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy, and the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. And then he goes on, so where do fightings and strivings come from? So we understand the context and the flow of this letter. He was basically saying, listen, you cannot operate in the wisdom of this world. He's making a distinction between the wise and the foolish. The wise guard righteousness, they have their minds set on that which is from above, while those who are given over to jealousy and foolishness, selfishness, this is a result of earthly demonic dangers. So you want to know some demonic things? He's telling us what's demonic. And ultimately, when you're not following Yahweh's ways, it's demonic belief. Because you might even believe that Elohim is one, but you're not, you shudder, you're not working out a deliverance. The demons aren't obeying. And so this, speaking against the falsehood of foolish teachers who are not teaching righteousness, he's now addressing the issue of jealousy and strife that was seen within the community because the body was not being taught right. So he's saying, now this is what's happening. Now everybody's jealous against this one and that one, and this is not, and this is pretty much a big state of the body today. He highlights that envy and strife comes in a community because people are either not asking for wisdom from above, or when they are trying to ask, they're not asking with the right motives, because they're asking because they just want to benefit themselves. Because as Karlin said, you become your own Elohim. It's selfishness. And what we came out from in Christianity, I'll tell you right now, it's basically a model of selfishness, you know. And so he presents this question, where do they come from? Because there was obviously a lot of strivings and fightings going on. And the word for fighting, it gives the idea of quarrels, fights, disputes. Striving is also the same similar word in Greek, giving this. So the idea is there was a lot of disputes going on, a lot of things that weren't being done right. And Shaul tells Timotheus of the one who's teaching falsely. He says he's puffed up, understanding none at all, but is sick about questionings and verbal battles from which come envy, strife, slander, and wicked suspicions. I often say to people when they say, oh, this guy's saying this and he's talking about this in the Torah, I say, you know what? Listen to what Shaul says. Steer clear from verbal battles that lead to strife. If somebody wants to have a thrashing out of the word to grow in knowledge and hear the truth, that's a great thing, you know. And sometimes they can get quite passionate discussions. That's good. But when it's just about trying to prove something wrong or prove something, you know, that lead to strife, verbal battles about we read the genealogy of Messiah today. So when somebody wants to start questioning whether Yahweh is Yeshua, you're going to waste time trying to go into those things. You've got to learn to see the red flags, when not to engage and when to engage. So that's where we've got to learn the wisdom of Shalom, or, you know, answer a fool according to his folly, lest you become like him. Do not answer a fool according to his folly, lest he becomes wise in his own eyes. So it's like you often think this is life lessons that we learn. And as we grow in maturity, we begin to learn when we should engage in a discussion and when we should refrain from a battle. Because there's a difference between a verbal battle and an earnest discussion. You know, the enemy is seeking to cause heated debates. He loves it. He loves division. You know, and he answers